Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of What's Brown Got to Do with It. So, a while back, I was telling a coworker about the podcast, and he asked me what the podcast would be about. So, when I told him it's about focusing on South Asians, he said, "Oh, I thought it might be on fashion because you're always well dressed." So, as much as I took that as a huge compliment, I decided that I wanted to actually have an episode dedicated to this, which is why I'm so excited to introduce my next guest. Many of you already know her as an entrepreneur, a celebrity influencer, presenter, and a media personality. So, when I talk about my next guest, she has repeatedly been named in the top 100 most influential Asians in the Middle East by various magazines and publications, specifically one that comes to mind is Arabian Business. She's also been named one of the top most influential, 25 most influential women in the Middle East by Vogue India. So, with great pleasure, I would love to welcome Rosemin Madhavji on the show. Hi, Rosemin.
Hi, how are you?
I'm
Thank
good.
you
How
for
are
having
you?
me.
Thank you
Well,
for joining.
I'm super excited to be here. And honestly, the minute I got your email and I read the title of your podcast, I mean, I had to be a part of it. So thank you.
I'm so happy that you're here. And firstly, congratulations on your recent marriage. It
Thank
looks
you.
phenomenal. We'll talk a little bit about the fashion part of that a bit
Yeah.
later on. So, Rosemin, I know there's so much I want to talk about, but I think I want to start from the beginning. You
Yeah.
have over 20 years of experience in the fashion industry,
Yeah.
and there's so much that you have done. How did you get into this world of fashion?
To be honest, I was always, I think if you ask my parents, I was always attracted to that world of photography and fashion. I had an older sister who was 11 years older than me. And so she was kind of my role model because I started seeing high heels. I was exposed to Vogue magazine and all, every kind of publication. So I think I was more attracted to these fashion magazines than I was of like fairy tale books. And I think a lot of my I'm 43, so I think for me, when I put things in perspective, I think a lot of my discipline and the way I look at things and what I was exposed to really come down to my parents. They were immigrants from East Africa, we're South Asian. They immigrant. My dad was in the UK. Then everything kind of happened with Idi Amin, and they chose Canada to be home. And I think when you really look back at like every step of the way, my parents had what most people would say was a typical first business in Canada, and that was like those news magazines, the corner store, and that was their first business. And then from my dad bought that business, and then he bought the building, and then from there he went into real estate. But that first investment really changed my life because my sister and I were exposed to the world of every single international publication we could think of. And for me, I've always been attracted to Town and Country, W, and Vogue, Harper's Bazaar. So these four titles, and they're still kind of magazines which I still subscribe to.
That's amazing. So, how long did you live in the UK for?
So I grew up in Canada, and I moved to the UK for fashion school when I was 18, 18
Okay.
or 19. Yeah. But
And
growing up in Canada, I worked, my weekends were working at Club Monaco, and then I interned in their head office. And in high school, I took part in the high school fashion show. So I designed my first collection there. So I always did things to try and understand what that industry was about, whether it was retail or pattern cutting or doing short courses in the summer.
where was it that you went to university?
So I went to what's called now the University of Arts, but I graduated from a London College of Fashion in fashion
Wow.
management.
And how was that? Because were there many South Asians at that time, like studying with you or doing that with you?
I don't really recall that my class had 50 students and it was broken down into group A and B. And my other South Asian friend was actually my friend Roshni, who lives in Dubai, ironically. And I actually didn't even really know what Dubai was until I really met her when I was in college. And she would always tell me during, long weekends or holidays that she'd go back to Dubai. And that was kind of my little introduction to Dubai. But really, no, I didn't really see. It was most of my class was filled with Europeans and yeah, mainly Europeans.
because that's something that you don't see much of, and that is, South Asians in kind of mainstream fashion. And when I was
Well,
thinking about this,
I think in the creative industry in general, I mean, you don't
yeah.
only now you're seeing this exposure. I mean, my brother is, I think, I don't know if we're like our worst nightmare for our parents because I think our parents really wanted like doctors and lawyers and like, my sister went into political science, but like my brother and I, he's an actor and a screenwriter. He had his own, TV show for many years. He's in a lot of the mainstream shows right now, which you see in the US and Canada. So both of us are really in the arts. So yeah, I think you just I don't know where life takes you, and sometimes I think it's really nice that our parents, as much as they gave us foundation and values, they really opened their palms and let us, develop
Yeah,
our skills.
explore, exactly, and follow your passion. And maybe that's one of the contributions, because I can imagine at that time there wasn't much of that like happening. I was talking to a friend yesterday, and we were talking about just artists, like South Asian artists. And and I said, oh, imagine like there was a time if you brought a guy home and said, he's an artist, like the reaction would be, well, he's a painter, like why are you marrying a painter? And there's such a like disparity between the two professions. But I think that's slowly changed. And what I find is that when we talk about like the South Asian diaspora, or just like South Asians in general, I see a lot of more of, for example, Indian creativity in mainstream. And I feel like there's still a long way to go for places like, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Afghanistan. You still don't see that. Why do you think that is?
Uh, Listen, being an artist is not easy. I'm telling
No.
you, because I did come from a corporate world and then I went into this entrepreneurial field about 16 years ago. And there is really a difference, right? There's a sense of security where you're getting a paycheck, and like there's a lot of things. And with an artist, my brother and I have this conversation all the time. It's that it's not a 9 to 5 job. And like, the other day I was hosting like a big charity gala, and like I'm lucky that my husband was there and he was super supportive. But like, yeah, you're kind of there doing sound, hair and makeup, sound check. You go on stage. By the time you finish, it's like midnight, 1 a.m. It's a long night. And someone for like, my brother, like we talk about it when he has relationships as well. When he's on a TV show, he's gone for like 3 or 6 months, where he's shooting nonstop, or if he's on a movie set. And and then when you're not working, you're off for like a few months, and in between you're doing, he's writing and auditioning. So, that consistency it's not comfortable. It just isn't a comfortable place to be in. And so you really have to have a partner that understands, or a family that understands what you're going through. And so, financially, yeah, it can be rewarding if you get the right gig or the right job or the right fame, that comes with it. Um, but yeah, it is a conversation to have, and it's probably not the most comfortable one to
Easiest.
always
Yeah,
be
of
in.
course.
Yeah.
So let's talk about like your success story. How did you break in? You were working for, I think you started off with Tom Ford. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I
How did that
started.
happen?
That was actually a really funny story because when I was in university, I used to read and I think a lot of people in the UK read the Sunday Times, and they had a supplement they had this really famous supplement called The Style, and I literally would not miss this supplement every week. This was like Sunday papers were so important, sitting in a cafe and reading the Sunday papers. So there was an issue called The Style, and it was edited by Colin McDowell. And while I'm going through it, there was a double page spread talking about the Costume Society, which is a very like British organization, talking about like the history and craftsmanship of costumes and Britain around the arts and culture sector. And so, of course, I'm reading this article, and at the bottom of this article in fine print, like really small in the corner, it said the next Costume Society event will be Colin McDowell, who's like a celebrated, renowned journalist, interviewing Tom Ford at the V&A. And I literally, my mouth dropped because this was someone I had written essays on and projects about, Gucci Group and Domenico De Sole and Tom Ford. And I literally just called the Costume Society. And in the beginning, they were like, "Who are you? You sound so young." And I was young. I was like in my first year of university. And so I said, no, no, like I have to, like, please, I'll do anything. And I literally pleaded on the phone. And I think this woman felt very sorry for me. So she said, okay, as long as you make a donation to the Costume Society, you can attend this event. So it was 20, I think it was £20. So I paid the £20
Oh
and I got my
wow.
ticket to this, yeah, to this, to this event. And, being a first year university student, I had come from Canada. And if you can just imagine the exchange rate at the time, it was 3 to 1, okay, for the
Oh
pound,
wow.
Canadian dollar and the pound. So anything that my parents had given me as an allowance, anything that I was making on the weekends as a part time job, like it was just never enough. It was so expensive being in the UK at that period. And so I remember that day I had an exam, and honestly, at that point, it didn't even occur to me to take a taxi. I was only taking the tube, and my school was right next to Bond Street. So I took the tube to South Kensington Station, running, running, running. I just thought if I took the taxi, I probably would have been there on time. But I took the tube, and of course, I'm super late because I had an exam that day. And I get to the V&A, and I realize there's no elevators, and the auditorium's on the very top floor. So I'm running up these stairs. I get to the auditorium. I'm super late, and the door opens, and everyone kind of like you could just see this light come in, because I'd opened the door, and this woman just grabbed me to sit down because she didn't want me to interrupt the talk on stage, which was happening between Mr. Ford and Colin McDowell. And so, you know, I get to the talk. I'm just mesmerized listening to him. I can't believe I'm even there. I definitely am the youngest person in the room. And at the end, the lights go on, and this woman just looks at me and she's like, "Who are you? You're a kid. Like, what are you doing here?" And so I just tell her how, like, I've just been kind of obsessed with him and his story and the whole idea of Gucci Group and the turnaround. So I said, like, I'm a student at London College of Fashion. Like, what do you do? And she goes, "No, I'm the UK PR director." And I just kind of smiled and I said, "I would love to work with you." So she gives me her card and she goes, "Send me your resume." And of course I didn't have a resume, like it was my first year of university, so I like went home, typed up this resume, emailed her. It said, "It was so nice meeting you." She goes, "Come to my office." I think it was like 3 p.m. the next day or something, and I or was in the morning, something like, "Come next day." And I literally just went the next day and I started interning. And that was at a time when there was no like, when you had to get papers, you literally cut the paper, photocopy it, fax it. It was like in the world of fax machines, no, no scanners. And so that's what I started. I started packing up clothes and working with magazines. And I was, I think for me, I was just so excited to be in that environment. And I think one of the things, probably because the UK was so expensive and I didn't think how long I could actually be there for, I made a conscious effort in my head saying that, I'm in London. I'm probably going to end up in New York, which is closer to my family. It's a city where I'm very familiar. These 3 years I'm here in the UK, I'm going to do everything I can to be a sponge. And that's what I did. I had a real passion for art. So I interned at an exhibition with Sotheby's. I worked at Burberry as a showroom assistant, like literally serving coffees to buyers and the CEO. And when they were doing like the sales time, I even modeled for like the Asian market because I was like really skinny and short. And so I had all these kind of crazy experiences, but Gucci was really my consistent. Like I was always working in the press office. And then there was a time where, I think I just over delivered, but in a good way because I was just so excited. I didn't care if I left the office at 5 o'clock or I left at 7. I just wanted to be around there. I wanted to understand the industry. I wanted to understand how um, just kind of everything works. And so I think he started hearing Mr. Ford ended up hearing my name, like, who's this girl that's doing, anything that was happening in the press office and working late. And when there was an opportunity for a second assistant role, which was literally in his office, his PA, and then his second assistant, um, they asked me to join. And the thing is that I was in my second year of university, so I couldn't
Wow.
quit school.
Yeah.
And it was funny because when I went to the dean of my college, I said, "I just got this job with Tom Ford." He's like, "Go take it." And my parents were like, "Absolutely not. Like, we sent you there for an education." They're like, "I don't care who's offering you a job. You're going to
Yeah.
finish, going to get that diploma, get your certificate, and then we can talk." And, I feel like, sometimes when things are right, they're just meant to be because I handed in my
Yeah.
dissertation on a Thursday and Monday morning I was working with him and my life changed.
I mean, that's amazing that he even like waited or like reached out and stuff. But yeah,
Yeah, it
typical
was.
Asian parents, like, no, no, no. Do finish this and do what my dad to my sister, she said, "I want to do journalism." And he said, no, you need to do law and then you can do whatever you want.
Cons, yeah.
So
Well, I think my
it's
parents, well, honestly, like, the reality of it is that you saying that I'm going to fashion school was not easy. And if I didn't have a sister, and if she didn't come with me for my interviews, like, there's no way I would even be accepted in a program like that. And by the way, like, just for people out there, like, I had parents like that. My dad's like, listen, you can apply to your FIT in New York and your Parsons and London College of Fashion in England, but my dad's like, you are still applying to these schools in Canada for business and international business. And my dad goes, I just want to know that you're capable of getting in. And when I got all my acceptance letters for all those universities, then I actually showed him going, listen, I am capable of getting in, but it's not my passion, it's not my drive. Please let me have this opportunity to go to the UK.
I mean, but your story also paves the way for so many, people that are so interested in and find it difficult to get into mainstream fashion, or just that industry in the arts industry, because there is a lot of work. There's a lot of drive that comes. I mean, clearly from your story, you drove it yourself. Like, you showed up, you were passionate. People could clearly see you through that passion. But was there ever a time when you felt, a lot of the times we hear South Asians, they feel that the color of their skin, or being brown, goes against them, or they have to work twice as hard as anybody else to kind of prove themselves worthy to be in that situation. Was that ever, at any point, did you ever feel that was the case for you?
Honestly, for me personally, I haven't had that experience. Maybe I've been lucky, or maybe I just ignored everything. And I think for me, I just had a very clear path of what I wanted and, what my skill set was. And I think, to be honest, that's probably the truth of it, is that I just really focused. I realized that, like, my passions were in this art field, whether it was in, I really, like, I loved art. And so one of my favorite jobs in university was working at Blaine's Fine Art on the weekends as a receptionist. And that's how I learned about contemporary art and my passion for it. And so, I think for me, I just was like, I want to learn, I want to be exposed, I want
Hmm.
to be a sponge. And I kind of just shut out that noise.
Yeah.
Um,
I agree with
so,
that, because I do think that a lot of the times, we do focus so much on kind of like, oh, maybe it's because I'm brown, or maybe it's because of I'm a woman. But sometimes it's actually, if we just did what we want to do, like set out to, follow your dreams and make things happen, then maybe things would fall into place for so many people.
yeah.
But with that said, I don't know many South Asians who have Louboutins named after them. Like, how on earth did that happen?
I've just been lucky. I mean, like, one of my favorite relationships is actually with Christian Louboutin. I mean, he was at my wedding last month, and I met him when I was young. I met him in London for university, and then, like, a friend of mine used to be one of his retail directors. So I would see him in London when he was there, but, like, really, like, not super close or anything. And then fast forward, we were in Dubai together, and we were at the same table at a polo match for Cartier. And we just really reconnected. And he was like, Roseman, I'm opening my business here, and this is the distributor I'm going to plan to work with. And so we had this conversation, and at that point, I'd already just started RR&Co. And I was like, amazing. Well, I was like, listen, if you need anything, like, they're the best distributor, like, they're friends of mine, you're in great hands. And I kind of just left it. And then I remember getting a call from his head office and then the local partner in the Middle East going, okay, so you'll be handling all the media relations and the PR and the press. And, like, they gave me a whole list. And I was like, sorry, what? And they're like, and it was already in the contract that, that would be subcontracted to my company. And I think when you have opportunities like that, where these designers, whether they're like a Tom Ford, Alice Temperley, Kara Ross, like, all these brands that I've worked with, because they know my work ethic, they know what I can deliver, they know that I understand the way they work. it,
Mm,
it was very easy. Like, my role was really, and the role of RR&Co when it first came, was really to be the bridge between the head office in Europe or the US and the
mm.
Middle East, and to really understand the Middle East clientele, but to deliver that excellence, that standard of business. And so that was really our role. And Christian and I, like, I mean, he's such a good friend, but we built the business in the Middle East, and we opened stores across the Middle East. We did so many events, from shoe signings to his 20th anniversary. And so it was just really nice because every time I'd be with him, obviously I used to live in like Louboutin shoes, and I would always wear the same style. And probably one of the first pairs I ever invested in was called Non Privé, and so it's probably his most famous, which has a hidden platform. And I just thought they were like the most comfortable shoes in the world, and I just had them in every single color because they gave you a level of height, but then you couldn't see the
Mm,
platform. It was just very cleverly designed. And so I would live in them, and I still have like them in every color. And he would always tell me, he's like, Rosemin, why can't you wear any of my trendy, like my latest style? And I was like, Christian, I can work with you and run a mile in this style. So when the shoes came out, which are called the Rosemin, they're actually the front of it is called the Non Privé, which is the exact same.
yeah.
And then the back of it is a clear acrylic heel, and it basically describes my style. It's really classic feminine with a twist of trend, and so that heel is kind of representative of how he would describe me.
Amazing. So you talked about like your company, and that you moved it. Where did you see that gap in the market? Like, how did you then transition to coming to Dubai?
So I would be traveling to Dubai for the past 20 years, mainly for holiday. I had a few friends here, and really it was like it had the best Emirates flight. I think they still have this flight, this 10 p.m. flight, and you land at like 6 a.m. So I would have a full workday in London. I would leave the office, pick up my luggage, be at the airport by 8, flight at 10, and you'd have a weekend in the sun and the beach. And so it was actually like the best flight. And so I kind of started understanding the landscape of Dubai. I was kind of very open, and when I started coming here, obviously there was no malls or anything. It was just a few hotels. And when I was at Gucci, I saw them starting to do franchise deals with the companies here. So there was this level of interest. When I was at Juicy Couture, we did concession deals with Harvey Nichols and open stores. And so I was kind of always a part of those deals, and I'd kind of see these things happening. And I moved to Dubai because, we bought a family house on the Palm, and with construction, I went here to kind of oversee it for 3 weeks. And 3 weeks just opened my eyes because I was sitting in this hotel and I started seeing so many gaps in the market. And a lot of my ex-colleagues from Gucci Group started calling me and going, Roseman, like, would you mind just going to our store and just telling me what you think of the buy, or what is the service like, or, what is your opinion on X, Y, and Z? And one of the best things that Tom Ford had trained me was I had a really good eye to see things that were commercial, and what was kind of editorial. And I used that skill set at Juicy Couture. I used it in my own business. I could look at a collection and say, okay, this is what's going to sell for a real consumer. This is what's going to look great in a photo shoot or editorial. And so I started seeing that eye. And when I started going to these stores, I started realizing, like, because they didn't have head offices really based in this part of the region, you don't know the consumer. And Dubai was becoming such an incredible place of multinationalities, financial centers opening. You could start seeing women going to work so much. Like, they didn't want sparkly heels, embellished heels going to the office. Like, they needed a classic pair of comfortable court shoes. And this was just really hard. So I started emailing my friends back, but really as friends, going, listen, like, your classic court shoes missing in colors like nude, brown, black. Um, the sales assistant doesn't know who the creative director is, doesn't know how to describe the bag or the, basic kind of selling points. And so I started realizing there was a gap in the market of really making sure that luxury client is getting exceptional service in London, Paris, New York, and of course in the Middle East. So that's kind of how RR&Co started. And we ended up being the first multi-brand luxury showroom here, which is the best practice, which happens in Europe and the US, of these multi-brand showrooms where you can take sampling and product and shoot it and send it back. But they didn't have that when I was here.
And how has it like been able to bridge the gap or the market like between the Middle East and like the South Asian countries? Because you've done a lot of work around the whole region, including like India, Pakistan, and all of those countries.
It's really fascinating because Dubai, like, I mean, really, if we talk about Dubai, it's become the central hub. I mean, it's the
Hmm.
best airline in the world, best shopping, best food. It's literally, I describe Dubai the best if East meets West. So you
Hmm.
have a huge South Asian population here. They're probably, I think, the number one, retail and homeowners. And I think, when having a business like mine, it was really important to explain to these head offices who the populations are, and you have to really cater to that. You have to know when certain holidays are happening, whether it's an Eid or a Diwali, and what the culture is, and how to communicate with that customer, and how to reach out to them in an appropriate way, and how to write text to them. And so that was kind of our role. And obviously, the main part of our business was like the PR side. We were just here at a very lucky time where Dubai Mall was opening, Mall of Emirates were opening. So we were very involved with a lot of the store openings and building that consumer base for these brands. We actually shut the business probably around, like, the PR side of the business around 7 years ago, or 8 years, yeah, 7, 8 years ago. And it's only because the structure of the government structure had changed here, where Chanel was opening Chanel Middle East, Burberry was opening Burberry Middle East. All these companies can actually open on their own, whether it's Prada Middle East. So all these brands that we used to work with as a head office now have, solid offices here.
Yeah. So, what would you say? What opportunities are available now that you think weren't available before? And this is for anyone that's thinking of, because it's never too late, right? Like if you're passionate about something, to go into it, no matter how old you are, what where you're from. Um, but there were challenges. Obviously, there were so many things not available when you first came into this industry. So, what would you say are the differences between then and now?
When I look at from '07, from when I moved here, everything's a risk, right? So every, like, setting up a business was difficult. Understanding the company, banking structure, the rules were always changing. You have to be on top of it. As much as you talk about my success, which is, I'm so grateful, there are a lot of lessons learned, right? And a lot of lessons were that I was I technically, and I laugh about this now because I call myself an accidental entrepreneur. Because if I was in London still, I would have stayed in that corporate structure of an LVMH or a Gucci group or a Kering group, right? And I just kind of climbed the ladders. And so, being kind of an accidental entrepreneur, you kind of have to learn on the go. And there's, like, how do you price yourself? How do you manage yourself? One of my biggest mistakes was not hiring a finance director to help me build my business, because I thought I could do it myself. And really, you can't, because what happens is, for me personally, I just ended up going into my own wallet and kind of feeding the company when times were low, or when I wanted to spoil my employees, or I wanted to, like, make sure everything was the best, or I didn't have anyone really advising me on how to really create a successful business and grow it. So I think those were, I mean, to be honest, those were one of the hardest, you have to learn.
Yeah, but you
That was
have
a
one now,
lesson.
right?
Yeah, now I learned yeah, I definitely learned. Because, Dubai's been so amazing. I mean, I think a lot of my success and kind of being able to adapt has been probably my key to success. Because by, I think, the first year and a half, I got a call from Dubai One, which was a TV station here. They had a TV show. They gave me a 15-minute segment on beauty and fashion. And they were like, listen, Roseman, no one has a CV like yours. You've worked with celebrities, you've been to all the award shows, you've worked with all these designers, like, 15 minutes of airtime. And I ended up working with the TV show and coining my own segment called Fashion Thursdays. And, where else would that happen in the world, right? And then 6 months later, I get a call from New York going, we just signed the franchise for Harper's Bazaar Arabia. We want you involved. And at that point, my company had kind of just mushroomed. And I was like, okay, I can't work with you full time, but I'll come on as, like, a special director or contributing editor. And I ended up being with Harper's for 13 years, which was the longest running contributing editor technically, and in the Middle East. And I literally just left them during COVID. And so it's, these opportunities have come because I was here, because I, had something to offer. But it's also been nice that I was able to just adapt and grow with the country and grow with the industry here.
Where do you think there's like room for improvement in terms of the maybe South Asian presence in a lot of these spaces? Where can South Asians help themselves, and where do you think some of those challenges are for South Asians?
In the fashion space, or just in
Yeah,
general?
I mean in general, I think.
I think when people talk about fashion in general, they just think that it's designing, and it's not, and it's really not. Like, this is a multi-billion dollar industry. And for people that want to be a part of it, like, if you're great in finance, like, you can work in a fashion company and work as the account director. So you can still use your mathematical and financial skill set and be in a fashion environment. So I just feel like some people, when they talk about fashion, they just think, oh, it's just the arts, or it's just, it's fun and creative, but it really is a business, and you have to have a business mindset to really excel. And I think really going forward, if you want any management opportunities, having business skills and a commercial mindset is an asset to the business. It's not just about being creative. But the past, I think, 2 years especially has been such a dynamic time for South Asians, not only in Hollywood, where you see these incredible shows that, Mindy Kally's producing, or even when I watch my brother, like he's in shows like Star Trek to, Schitt's Creek, and like it just, when I watch him, I'm like, oh my God, like how cool is that? That like, you probably wouldn't see a South Asian in Star Trek, but here he is. And so it makes me really proud to see South Asian presence happening not only in Hollywood and these main markets, but also, in the fashion industry. Last March, I was in India. It was such a phenomenal week in India because it was the Dior
The
show.
deal. Mm.
Under the gate, under the iconic
Yeah.
gateway to India. It was just absolutely stunning. They promoted India so well that week
So
because
well.
they had
Yeah.
planned these tours, visiting the Chanaka Institute, the Chanaka School, which was actually doing all the embroidery for the Dior show, and they still do a lot of the Dior projects as well as other brands. And it actually highlighted the reality of the fashion industry, that most of the
Mm.
embroidery in these high fashion places are all done in India. And then the
Exactly.
embroidery
Yeah.
comes back to Europe, and then it's placed, it's finished in Italy. And it was such an eye opener for a lot of people globally to see what the process is of that one gown that people see on the red carpet, that it's designed in Italy or France. Then the embroidery part of it is in India, comes back. And so it was such an incredible time. And then, of course, with the opening of NMCC, which, the Ambanis hosted, it literally put India on the map that week. And everything was done so smoothly, so safely. Everything was so opulent. And it, for that 1 or 2 weeks, it was all over the news. And I was so proud not only to be there, but really to be South Asian and see, the excellence of giving back, all the charitable, elements, not only that the Ambani showed, but also this element of like the Chanaka Institute, how they help women training, learning these skill sets, how they try and preserve the embroidery, like the traditional embroidery, because craftsmanship is, if you're not training the next generation, these kind of,
Can get
you
lost.
know,
Yeah.
can get lost, right? And that's actually like true everywhere, like even in Italy and France, it's a constant conversation.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that AI can't
Yeah,
replace.
exactly.
So it's
Exactly.
a
And
skill that's
so
always, yeah. But even like in Pakistan, Bangladesh, like there's so many, the garigars there as it's so, the work, the pieces, it's just you can't compare it to. And I think you're right, you absolutely do forget that there are people behind this that are sitting there and actually stitching the thousands of beads that are on your,
on your
it's
pace.
not, absolutely. So
Sorry, I was just saying, I just came back from Dhaka this week. I arrived back yesterday and I did a tour of one of these incredible factories, um, Generation X, and it was so phenomenal. They had 3 buildings. The amount of employees that are women that are working, I was honestly so impressed with it because they had a childcare built in their in their offices and on the ground, so women can bring their children to work. Kids had a nap time. They were fed, 3 meals and snacks. They had classes. They had a whole medical clinic on hand there. It was so impressed to see that this part of the world, what they offer, and how many people are working and how many people are employed. And so seeing that, from literally from the yarn to produce the cloth, and then from the cloth it turns into these t-shirts or dresses, and it was actually just fascinating.
I mean, I love that. I love the fact that, people are now being considerate towards, okay, a woman can be more than just a mother and a wife. And, let's help create that kind of space for women to excel in what they want to do. I love that. That's amazing. One
Honestly,
of
for me, oh, sorry, I was just gonna say, while we're talking about women, I think that I always say this is like, when women have some financial power, it doesn't have to be the ultimate breadwinner, but when you have a sense, the ability to earn, it changes the conversation and the dynamics in a relationship. And so it is so important that you have your own passion in a relationship, and whatever that is.
100%. Yeah. So the last thing I want to kind of talk about is, you do a lot of charitable work, but one of your organizations that you work for is the Bras for a Cause.
Yeah.
Um, and you've championed the cause of breast cancer awareness for many, many years now. Um, how active are the South Asian community with this? And where is the kind of need or the gap for people to, because, I think a lot of the times growing up, there were lots of things that weren't discussed, and things like, mental health, even, you can't say the worst word breast, let alone,
Yeah.
you have breast cancer, and so many things are kind of just not spoken about. But there's just so much more awareness now. How has that grown with the South Asian diaspora?
Listen, breast cancer is a reality, and breast cancer is the one disease that if you catch it early enough, it is curable. And I always tell women in general, like my mom had breast cancer at a very young age. I was only I think 3 years old, and so I saw that happening. And it was at a time where there was no really cure, and everyone around her was passing away. And I think her group that actually did chemotherapy together, she was the only survivor. And so my mom says that, her saving grace was having 3 children, and she's like, I'm going to live for you guys. And my mom's 83, like knock on wood, which I love
Wow,
her so
mashallah.
much. And yeah, and you know it was at a time where no doctor wanted to even touch her. They didn't understand it. And I just think that now, I tell my friends that conversation of getting a mammogram. I actually hate when I hear news that they're only going to do mammograms if you're above 40. Like, I think women should be having mammograms at least every other year or something. There has to be something in place where women are getting this, and then maybe at 30 you get it every other year or every year going forward. But really learning how to do a breast examination, like women have to take, and men as well, have to take health in their own hands. And so if you feel something uncomfortable, you're not feeling well, you have to listen to your body and, you know make that appointment to the doctor before it's too late. But yeah, I try and have that conversation as much as I can. For me, the month of October, I really kind of keep it as free as possible. Anytime there is anything that's happening for breast cancer awareness, whether it's through fashion brands like Ralph Lauren or, Pink Caravan here, like I'm very happy to give my time and talk about it, because I just think that, um, if I can just use my platform, even just a little bit to talk about it, I feel like if I can change one person's life, then I've done something.
I mean, it's an amazing cause, and I think there's a lot to be said for in the South Asian community for changing not just the lifestyle but the mindset that, the lifestyle change is to actually improve one's health, and especially in the older generation,
Yeah, of
they
course.
often, even with my own parents, there's always this battle well, that's good for you, that's not good for you, but there's no science to kind of back it.
Yeah.
But they'll still eat the same food and still have the same lifestyle, so there's a lot to be said for that. But on that note, Rosemin, thank you so much. This was so
Thank you.
amazing, so informative.
Thank
I really
you.
can't wait to see, where you go next, and
Thank you.
where your company goes, and just, seeing. I'd love to just see a lot more South Asian presence in these spaces, and I think, we're getting there. Like you said, there's a lot of
No,
room, but we're actually.
there's definitely a shift, and I think you can't expect change to happen overnight, but you can see
Mm,
things that are moving forward. And so I always think a lot of times people get mad of things that happened in the past, but a lot of that has to do with conditioning,
mm,
right? So it's like how you're conditioned to deal with things or what you're exposed to. And I think growing up
yeah.
in Canada was probably the most incredible experience, because my it was such
Mm,
a multicultural country, and even where I grew up, my friends were from all over the world. So
mm,
I just feel that, I was lucky to be in an environment where I never asked people where they're from. My best
yeah.
friend, uh, all of them came from different cultures, and that's how we learned about different foods or how to use chopsticks.
Mm,
Or when they came to my house, they were eating, South Asian food. Like that's how we learned
mm,
about each other's cultures. And so I think as long as the world is progressing forward, which I think you can see, that's
mm.
then you're on the right track.
Exactly. So, one question I ask all my guests, and I'm going
Yes.
to ask you, is
Mhm.
what's brown got to do with it for you? What does being brown mean to you?
I will say I'm very personally, I'm very blessed to grow up with family values.
Mm,
I think there's importance about family. And so, you know, I think the day I left home at, I think whatever, 18 or 19, I moved to London. I have never, ever, ever missed one phone call with my mom on a Saturday. And so now we are all on family chats and everything. And so we might tell each other
mm,
jokes or tell each other what we're doing. And my nephews are now on it. And so I probably talk to them every day or every other day on a group chat. But
mm,
that Saturday call, I will never miss, even if it's for 2 minutes, if I'm traveling, saying, "Hey, mom, I'm in the city, but I'll call you later," to hear her voice. So,
mm,
you know, there's this sense of family values and also spirituality. You know, like I've been really lucky to be a part of a community that gives back and that teaches
mm.
us meditation, and everything is about giving back to the community and the community at large. And I feel very blessed to be a part of a religious community that has that, and a family that has brought me up with that value system.
Thank you, Rosemin. Thank you
Thank
so
you
much
for
for
having
joining
me.
today.
Thank you.
And we'll see you soon. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye, everyone. Bye.